Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I never thought of myself as weak, but over the years, Jessica had made me feel that way. It wasn't always obvious. It wasn't the kind of abuse that left bruises or made me question my safety. No, Jessica was far more sophisticated than that. Her weapons were words, looks, carefully timed sighs of disappointment. It started small, so small that I didn't even notice it at first. A passing comment about how I didn't dress like a real man. A jab about how I never take charge of anything. Then, the more public humiliations. At first, I tried to laugh along. When she called me adorably clueless in front of our friends because I didn't know how to properly pair wine with dinner, I chuckled, pretending I didn't see the smirk on her lips. When she rolled her eyes at me in front of her coworkers and muttered, "He's just not great with social cues," I swallowed the sting. I told myself she didn't mean it, that it was just her way of teasing. But deep down, I knew better. The worst part wasn't the things she said when she was angry. No, it was the comments made in that sweet, sing-song voice, the way she would pat my arm like I was a child who just didn't understand the real world. I remember the time I forgot to pick up her dry cleaning after a long day of work. "Oh, honey," she had said, laughing in front of the woman behind counter. "You really do try, don't you?" I felt like I had shrunk 3 inches on the spot. I started to second-guess myself. Was I really that incompetent? Was I really not enough? I worked hard, I took care of things at home, I supported her ambitions. But nothing I did was ever enough. I could be exhausted from work, but if I didn't have the energy to listen to her rant about her day for an hour straight, I was emotionally unavailable. If I surprised her with flowers, she would wrinkle her nose and say, "You got these from the gas station, didn't you?" If I planned a weekend away, it wasn't to the right place, or I hadn't booked the right room, or I had forgotten that she didn't like this particular hotel chain. I tried to fight back. A few months ago, after she mocked me in front of her friends for mispronouncing the name of a fancy restaurant, I confronted her in the car. "Do you even respect me?" I asked, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than they needed to. She sighed dramatically. "Oh, Ryan, don't be so sensitive. It's just a joke. You always take things so personally." That was the problem. She had an excuse for everything. It was always a joke. I was always overreacting. I needed to man up. But the worst humiliation came at her family's annual 4th of July barbecue. We had been married for 5 years at that point, and every year, her parents hosted this massive gathering. Tons of food, drinks flowing, loud conversations. I had been dreading it for days. I knew what was coming. The subtle digs, the playful insults masked as banter. It started the moment we arrived. "Ryan, buddy," her father greeted me, slapping me on the back a little too hard. "Still working that desk job, huh? Thought you'd have moved up by now." I forced a smile. "Doing well, actually. Just landed a big client." "Oh, well, good for you," he said, clearly unimpressed. At dinner, Jessica was in full performance mode, laughing at my expense every chance she got. "Ryan tried to fix the sink the other day," she told everyone. 5 minutes in, he flooded the kitchen. I had to call an actual plumber. Laughter erupted around the table. I clenched my jaw. "It wasn't that bad," she cut me off. "Oh, honey, it was—" You should have seen him, standing there, all helpless with water, spraying everywhere. More laughter. Her brother, a man who had never worked a day in his life, shook his head at me. "Damn, Ryan, that's basic stuff. Even I could fix a sink." I took a sip of my beer, forcing myself to stay calm. Jessica wasn't done. "And don't even get me started on the time he tried to grill," she continued, wiping away fake tears of laughter. "He was so proud of himself, standing there flipping burgers like some kind of chef. And then Jessica." My voice was quiet but firm. She blinked at me, still grinning. "What?" I said, "That's enough." The table fell silent. Everyone was staring at me, waiting to see what would happen next. Jessica's face darkened. "Oh, come on, Ryan. Don't be so dramatic. I'm done," I said, pushing back my chair. "I'm done being the punchline of your jokes." She scoffed. "Ryan, sit down. You're making a scene." I stood. "No, you are. Every damn time we go anywhere, you turn me into some joke. I'm done playing along." She narrowed her eyes. "Ryan, don't do this." "Do what?" "Stand up for myself." I let out a bitter laugh. God forbid I actually pushed back for once. The air was thick with tension. Her father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Her brother avoided eye contact. Someone muttered something about how I was being sensitive. I turned to Jessica. You always say I overreact, that I take things too personally. But have you ever stopped to think about why? Maybe it's because my own wife treats me like an idiot in front of everyone she knows. Jessica's mouth opened and closed, but for once, she had nothing to say. I didn't wait for her to come up with another excuse. I grabbed my keys and walked out, leaving her sitting there, staring after me. I had spent years convincing myself that things weren't as bad as they felt, that she loved me in her own way. But standing there, in front of her family, watching them all laugh at my expense, I knew the truth. Jessica didn't respect me. And without respect, what did we have? I spent the entire drive home gripping the steering wheel like I was trying to strangle it. My heart was still pounding, my face burning with embarrassment and rage. The worst part wasn't even what Jessica had said. It was the way everyone else had laughed. Like I was some harmless fool who didn't deserve to be taken seriously. Like I was just there to be tolerated, not respected. I should have left years ago. I should have walked out the first time she made me feel like I was less than a man. But I hadn't. And now here I was, years later, finally realizing that no matter how much I tried to be a good husband, Jessica would never see me as anything other than a joke. By the time I got home, the anger had cooled, leaving behind something heavier. Something like grief. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the front door. Our house. The place we had built together. The place where I had convinced myself that things would get better, that I just needed to try harder. I wasn't sure what I expected when Jessica finally walked through the door an hour later. Maybe an apology, maybe some kind of guilt. But she came in like nothing had happened. Tossed her purse on the counter, kicked off her heels, and sighed dramatically. Well, that was embarrassing, she muttered, not even looking at me. I scoffed. Yeah, it really was. She turned, narrowing her eyes. I meant you, Ryan. You completely overreacted. I exhaled sharply, rubbing my temples. You humiliated me, Jessica, again, in front of your entire family. Do you even care how that feels? She crossed her arms. Oh, please. It was just a joke. I clenched my jaw. It's always just a joke with you. Always something I'm supposed to laugh off, even when it makes me feel like garbage. When do my feelings matter? She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Ryan. You're acting like I insulted your mother. I was just teasing. Teasing? I let out a bitter laugh. Jessica, you treat me like a child. You talk about me like I'm some incompetent idiot. I have never talked about you like that in front of other people. Not once. She waved a dismissive hand. You're being dramatic. You know I love you. Something inside me snapped. No, you don't. Her expression faltered for the first time. Excuse me? You don't love me, I repeated, my voice eerily calm. You love having someone to mock. You love having someone to make you feel superior. But love? That requires respect, Jessica. And you don't respect me at all. She stared at me like I had grown another head. Ryan, you're being ridiculous. You're just upset because you made a fool of yourself tonight. I let out a slow breath. No, I'm upset because I finally see you for who you are. A thick silence filled the space between us. For the first time in a long time, Jessica didn't have a quick retort. Then, as if deciding she was done with the conversation, she grabbed a bottle of wine from the kitchen, poured herself a glass, and walked off to the bedroom. And just like that, I knew this marriage was over. It didn't matter that she hadn't cheated. It didn't matter that she hadn't hit me. The respect was gone. The love, if it had ever really existed, was gone. And once those things were gone, there was no getting them back. But I wasn't going to be the fool who stayed, hoping things would change. I was done. The next week passed in a blur of cold silences and forced small talk. Jessica acted as if nothing had happened, as if my outburst at her family's gathering had just been an unfortunate moment of weakness on my part. She still expected me to laugh at her jokes, still expected me to carry on as if nothing had shifted. But something had. The moment of clarity I'd had that night didn't fade. In fact, it only grew stronger. Then came the dinner party. Jessica had invited some of her closest friends over, a group of people I had always been friendly with, but never quite felt at ease around. They were high-achieving, fast-talking, always discussing their next big promotion or exotic vacation. I had worked hard in my career, but I didn't flaunt it like they did. And Jessica made sure they all knew that. Ryan's idea of an adventurous meal is trying a new burger place, she quipped at one point, making the group laugh. I forced a smile. Let go. At least he's finally dressing a little better, one of her friends, Dana, chimed in. Remember when he used to wear those department store suits? Jessica smirked. Oh God, don't remind me. It was like being married to someone's accountant. Laughter. Something burned inside me, but I swallowed it down. Then, the final straw. Dana turned to me. Ryan, tell us, what's the biggest accomplishment of your year so far? I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, Jessica snorted. Oh, please. His biggest accomplishment was assembling a bookshelf without calling me for help. That was it. I set my fork down carefully. You know what, Jessica? She blinked at me. What? I think I'm done. Her forehead creased. Done with what? I stood, adjusting my sleeves. With this. With all of it. I gestured vaguely at the table. Enjoy your dinner, everyone. I'm out. Jessica let out a nervous laugh. Ryan, stop being so. I mean it. The room was dead silent. Jessica's face twisted into something unreadable. Ryan, sit down. No. Her voice dropped to a hiss. You are embarrassing me. I let out a hollow laugh. For once, Jessica, I don't care. I turned and walked away, leaving her and her perfect little dinner party in stunned silence. I didn't need to stay to hear what she said after I left. It didn't matter anymore, because I was done. I didn't go back that night. Instead, I drove around aimlessly, my thoughts racing. I knew I couldn't keep doing this, pretending, enduring, waiting for some moment that would never come. Jessica wasn't going to change. She had never seen me as her equal. I had been a fixture in her life, a supporting character in the story she wanted to tell. But I wasn't playing that role anymore. By the time I pulled into my driveway the next morning, my mind was made up. I was leaving. The only question now was how. I stepped inside, half expecting Jessica to be waiting, furious that I had walked out. But the house was silent. She had gone to work, probably assuming I would come crawling back with apologies. I wouldn't. I walked through the house, taking everything in, the furniture we picked together, the wedding photos on the mantel, the little signs of a life I had convinced myself was worth holding on to. But none of it felt like home anymore. I started packing. Just a suitcase at first, just what I needed to get by. As I stuffed my clothes into the bag, I stopped in front of the dresser. Jessica's jewelry box sat on top, a gift from me on our first anniversary. She had barely acknowledged it at the time, brushing off my effort with a casual, "It's nice, I guess." I had told myself she was just bad at expressing gratitude. Now I knew better. She never appreciated anything I did. As I turned to leave the bedroom, something caught my eye. The closet door was slightly open, and inside, on the top shelf, a small black box sat tucked between her purses. I frowned. Jessica never kept anything up there. Curious, I reached up and pulled it down. The weight of it was strange, heavier than I expected. I sat on the bed and opened it. My stomach dropped. Inside was a sleek, expensive-looking watch. Not mine. A pair of cufflinks. Again, not mine. A bottle of cologne, a scent I had never worn. And at the bottom, a card. My hands trembled as I flipped it open. Can't wait to see you again. Last weekend was incredible. No name, no signature, just a simple message, clear as day. I stared at it, my vision tunneling. The room around me blurred. My ears rang with a dull hum, like static in my brain. I reread the words, trying to make sense of them, trying to find some explanation other than the obvious. But there wasn't one. Jessica wasn't just cruel. She was unfaithful. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe minutes. Maybe an hour. Eventually, I forced myself to stand. My body felt disconnected from my mind. Every movement slow and deliberate. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to scream. I had spent years letting Jessica control my emotions, making me feel small. Not this time. I placed the box back exactly where I found it, making sure everything was as it was. If Jessica thought she had the upper hand, I wasn't about to change that. Not yet, because now I had something she never thought I would, leverage, and I was going to use it. I went about my day as if nothing had happened. That was the hardest part, acting normal. But I knew if I confronted Jessica now, she'd lie, twist the story, make me feel like I was the crazy one. No, I needed more. If I was going to take her down, I had to be smart about it. That night, when she got home from work, she acted exactly as I expected. Like nothing was wrong. She greeted me with a distracted, "Hey," before kicking off her heels and pouring herself a glass of wine. Not a care in the world. No vid. No hesitation. She didn't even notice the way I watched her, searching for some sign of regret. I forced myself to be casual. "How was work?" She sighed dramatically. "Exhausting. Meetings all day. I swear, I don't get paid enough to deal with these idiots." Meetings all day. A classic line. The same one she'd probably used last weekend when she was with whoever had given her that watch. I gritted my teeth, but kept my tone light. "Yeah, sounds rough." She walked over and leaned against the counter, tilting her head at me. "You okay?" I had spent years reacting, getting defensive, questioning her, letting her manipulate me. Not this time. I gave her a small smile, casual and unconcerned. "Yeah, just tired." It worked. She didn't press. That night, while she slept, I started my plan. I knew where to look now. I went through her laptop, searching for anything suspicious. It was locked with a password, but Jessica wasn't exactly unpredictable. After a few tries, our anniversary, her birthday, the name of our first pet, I cracked it. And there it was. Emails, messages, expense reports. She had been sloppy. She had booked hotel rooms on her corporate card, charged expensive dinners, even bought gifts. I scrolled through her emails, my pulse pounding. There were messages to someone labeled J, filled with inside jokes, flirtatious teasing, plans to meet up soon. No explicit details, but it was enough. She had been seeing this guy for months. I sat back, exhaling slowly. It wasn't just a fling. It wasn't just a mistake. She had built something with this man while still coming home to me, looking me in the eye, sleeping in our bed. I could have confronted her right then. I could have shaken her awake, shoved her laptop in her face, and demanded an explanation. But I had done enough reacting in this marriage. Now it was time to be proactive. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I made copies of everything. The emails, the receipts, the hotel bookings. I forwarded them to my own email, then deleted the evidence from her sent folder. She wouldn't know I had them. Not yet. Then I took the final step. I followed her. She had told me she had another long day of meetings. So I waited 10 minutes after she left, then got in my car and tailed her. And just like that, she handed me exactly what I needed. She wasn't careful. Maybe she didn't think she had to be. Maybe she thought I was too stupid to ever suspect anything. I watched as she pulled into the parking garage of an upscale restaurant. Then, minutes later, a man approached her car. Well-dressed, confident. They greeted each other like lovers. A quick glance around, a smile, then a kiss. I didn't feel anger. Not anymore. Watching them, I only felt something cold settle inside me. I took out my phone, snapped a picture. Proof. Jessica had spent years making me feel small. But now, I held the one thing that could tear her world apart. And I was going to use it. I sat in my car, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The image on the screen, a perfect shot of Jessica kissing the man outside the restaurant, felt surreal. I had spent years convincing myself that she was just cruel with her words, that maybe, deep down, she still cared. But this was undeniable. This was proof that she had never respected me, never valued me, and certainly never loved me. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface for years was finally reaching a boil. I could have driven away. I could have let her have her night, let her think she was getting away with it. But I was done waiting. I was done being patient, done playing the fool. I got out of my car, walked straight toward the restaurant, and stepped inside. The hostess barely glanced at me before offering a bright smile. Table for one. I scanned the room quickly, my heart hammering in my chest. Then I spotted them, a dimly lit corner booth. Jessica was laughing at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his wrist. She was leaning in close, her eyes filled with that soft, flirtatious warmth she hadn't shown me in years. My stomach turned. I forced myself to smile at the hostess. Actually, I see my party. I walked toward them with calm, steady steps. Jessica didn't notice me at first. She was too caught up in the fantasy she had built for herself, the illusion of a life without me in it. But the moment I reached the table and pulled out a chair, her body went rigid. Her lover, this well-dressed, smooth-looking executive, frowned at me, clearly confused. Can we help you?" I set my phone on the table, tapping the screen to bring up the picture. I turned it toward Jessica and let her look at it. Her face drained of color. I smiled. "No need to introduce me, Jess. I think I've got the gist of it." She swallowed hard. "Ryan, no, please." I leaned back in my chair, casually draping an arm over it. "I'd love to hear what excuse you're going to come up with this time. Maybe you'll tell me he's your business mentor. Maybe you tripped and your lips just happened to land on his." I turned to the man, who was now glancing nervously between us. "Tell me, buddy, did she ever mention she was married?" His jaw tightened. That told me everything I needed to know. Jessica's hand darted across the table, reaching for my phone, but I pulled it back before she could snatch it away. She hissed under her breath, "Ryan, we're not doing this here." "Oh, I think we are." I gestured around. "You wanted to humiliate me in front of my friends, in front of your family. It's only fair we balance the scales a little." The man stood abruptly, pulling his wallet from his pocket. "I didn't know she was married," he muttered, tossing a few bills on the table. "I don't do this kind of thing." Then he turned to Jessica, shaking his head in disgust. "You really didn't tell me?" Jessica was panicking now. "Jay, wait." But he was already walking out. She turned back to me, her hands clenched into fists. "Ryan, I swear I was going to tell you when. After your next weekend business trip? Maybe after I found more receipts for hotel rooms you charged to your corporate card." Her eyes widened. "You went through my, spare me the fake outrage, Jessica. You lost the right to privacy when you turned our marriage into a joke." I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "I used to wonder if I wasn't enough for you. If I just wasn't interesting or successful or confident enough. But now, I get it. It was never about me. It was always about you. About your need to feel superior. To feel like you were smarter than everyone else." Jessica's eyes were wild now, darting around the restaurant, no doubt aware that other patrons were beginning to watch. "Can we just leave? We need to talk about this." I stood up. "Oh, we'll talk. But not tonight." I slid a folder onto the table, the one I had prepared before I walked in. She glanced at it hesitantly before flipping it open. Inside were copies of the emails, the expense reports, the picture of her and her lover. Her face crumpled. "Ryan," I smiled, "you should probably check your work email. HR's going to want to have a word with you." Her breath hitched. "What did you do?" I leaned in close, just enough so only she could hear me. "I sent them everything, sweetheart." Then I walked out, leaving her sitting there, stunned, trapped in the mess she had created. I drove home with the windows down, letting the cool night air wash over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by frustration, resentment, or self-doubt. I had done it. I had exposed Jessica for exactly who she was, and I didn't regret a single moment of it. When I pulled into the driveway, the house felt different. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was because, in my mind, it wasn't our home anymore. It was just a place, a temporary stop before I moved on to something better. I stepped inside, tossing my keys onto the counter, and exhaled. It was over, or so I thought. An hour later, I heard the front door slam. Jessica had arrived. I didn't even bother turning toward her. I knew she was fuming, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she stormed toward me. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I took a sip of my drink, letting the silence stretch between us. "Ryan," she snapped, her voice shaking with rage. "Answer me." I finally turned, meeting her wild eyes. "What's wrong with me?" I let out a dry laugh. "Jessica, you cheated. You lied. You stole from your own company to fund your affair. And you have the audacity to act like the victim." Her hands were trembling as she threw her purse onto the table. "You didn't have to send that to HR. You've ruined my career, Ryan." I shrugged. "I didn't ruin anything. You did. I just made sure they knew the truth." She let out a sharp breath, pacing back and forth. "You think this makes you some kind of hero? You think you won?" I leaned back against the counter. "It's not about winning. It's about walking away knowing I'm not the fool you thought I was." Jessica's expression twisted with something ugly. "You really think you're so righteous, don't you? Like you didn't have a part in this. You were boring, Ryan. You were predictable. You never challenged me. I smirked. Right? Because treating me like a joke for years wasn't enough excitement for you. She groaned, dragging her hands through her hair. You just don't get it. No, Jessica. I do. I stepped forward, closing the space between us. You want to see how much you could get away with. How much I would take before I finally broke. And now that I'm done, now that I'm the one walking away, you can't stand it. Her jaw clenched. You don't get to walk away. You don't get to destroy my life and act like you're the victim. I laughed again, low and bitter. Jessica, you already destroyed everything. I just made sure you faced the consequences. Her breathing was uneven now, her body trembling with anger and desperation. You can't just throw everything away like this. Throw everything away? I gestured around. Jessica, what exactly am I supposed to be fighting for? A marriage where my wife belittles me in front of everyone she knows? A home that feels more like a prison? I should be thanking you. You set me free. Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't falling for it. Not anymore. Jessica wasn't crying because she regretted what she had done. She was crying because she had lost control. She took a shaky step closer, her voice softer now. Ryan, don't do this. We've built a life together. We can fix this. I stared at her, amazed at how quickly she had shifted from rage to pleading. It was almost impressive. Almost. No, Jessica, you don't get to manipulate your way out of this. I turned and walked toward the hallway, grabbing a folder off the table. And just so we're clear, I'm not sticking around for the fallout. I tossed it onto the counter in front of her. She eyed it cautiously before flipping it open. Her face paled. Divorce papers? She whispered. I nodded. Already signed on my end. You could drag out if you want, but trust me, Jessica, I'm done. She stared down at the papers, her hands gripping the edge like they might crumble in her fingers. Then, slowly, she lifted her head, her lips curling into something cruel. You'll regret this. I met her gaze, unflinching. No, I won't. And for the first time in years, I meant it. Jessica didn't sign the papers right away. Of course, she didn't. That would have meant admitting she had lost, that her carefully controlled life was unraveling right in front of her. Instead, she did what she always did. She played the victim. It started with the messages. At first, they were just angry. You're seriously going through with this? You're going to throw everything away over one mistake. Then came the deflection. Do you really think you're blameless? You weren't exactly the perfect husband, Ryan. And finally, the guilt. I gave you the best years of my life, and this is how you repay me. I ignored them all. She could rage, cry, scream. None of it mattered anymore. I wasn't playing her game. I had hired an attorney, handed over every piece of evidence I had collected, and made it clear that I wanted out as quickly as possible. Jessica, on the other hand, was determined to make things as messy as possible. A week after I served her the papers, I got a call from my lawyer. She's contesting, he said, his voice tight. She wants to negotiate the terms. I ran a hand through my hair, already exhausted. Negotiate what? She cheated. She stole from her company. I have proof of both. She's claiming emotional distress. I let out a bitter laugh. Emotional distress? Because she got caught. My lawyer sighed. Look, this is standard. She knows she's in a weak position, so she's stalling, hoping to get something out of you. Don't worry. We've got the upper hand. I wasn't worried. I was annoyed. Jessica knew this was over, but she couldn't just let it go. She had to drag it out, make me suffer a little longer. It was the last bit of control she had over me, and she was going to milk it for all it was worth. The first court meeting was a disaster. Jessica showed up looking perfectly put together, soft curls, minimal makeup, wearing a modest blouse like she was the picture of a wronged wife. When I sat across from her in the conference room, she barely even looked at me. Her lawyer cleared his throat. Jessica is willing to negotiate an amicable settlement. She believes that despite recent conflicts, both parties can walk away with dignity. I scoffed. Dignity? You think dignity is what she was worried about when she was booking hotel rooms on her corporate card? Jessica's jaw tightened. Her lawyer shot her a glance before turning back to me. She has concerns about financial stability. I stared at her. You make more than I do, Jessica. Her lips pressed together. Not anymore. Realization hit. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a low whistle. HR fired you. She didn't respond, but she didn't have to. The flicker of humiliation in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. For a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered all the years of mockery, the nights I'd spent wondering why nothing I did was ever good enough. And just like that, any sympathy I might have felt vanished. Her lawyer continued, oblivious to the silent war happening between us. Given her recent termination, Jessica is requesting financial support for the next 6 months to allow her time to transition. I laughed outright. You want me to pay you after everything you've done? Jessica finally spoke, her voice sharp. It's not like you're hurting for money, Ryan. I shook my head. That's not the point. You cheated. You stole. And now you want me to fund your little transition period? I leaned in, my voice dropping. You can burn in hell before I give you a single cent. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. If we can't come to an agreement, this could drag on for months. I met Jessica's gaze, and for the first time, I saw something new in her eyes. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. She had always believed she would win, that no matter what happened, she would come out on top. But now she was realizing she had no power left. I stood. Let it drag, then. I've got nothing to lose. Jessica did, and we both knew it. Jessica finally broke. 2 weeks after our last meeting, my lawyer called to tell me she had signed the divorce papers. No negotiations, no drawn-out battles. Just a clean break. Maybe she finally realized she had no leverage, or maybe she was just too exhausted to keep fighting. Either way, I didn't care. I was free. The day the papers were finalized, I packed the last of my things and walked out of the house for good. I didn't look back. There was nothing worth holding on to. The house had been a prison, a place where I had spent years walking on eggshells, convincing myself that if I just tried a little harder, Jessica would finally see me as her equal. Now I knew better. I moved into a modest apartment across town, nothing fancy, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I could breathe. No more waking up to passive-aggressive comments. No more pretending to laugh at jokes made at my expense. Just peace. The first few weeks alone were strange. I had spent so long being part of something, even if it had been toxic, that I had forgotten what it was like to just be me. There was no one demanding my time, no one criticizing how I spent my days. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. But then, slowly, I started to remember who I had been before Jessica. I started going to the gym again, not to impress anyone, but because it felt good to move. I reconnected with old friends, the ones Jessica had subtly pushed out of my life over the years. It was awkward at first, showing up after so much time had passed, but they welcomed me back without hesitation. You look different, my friend Mike said one night over drinks. I raised an eyebrow. How so? He shrugged. Lighter, like you finally stopped carrying a weight around your neck. I hadn't realized it until that moment, but he was right. Meanwhile, Jessica's life wasn't going so well. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was struggling. After losing her job, she had to move out of the house. Apparently, she had tried to get a new position in the industry, but word had spread about the company card fiasco. No one wanted to hire someone who had been fired for misuse of corporate funds. I should have felt bad, but I didn't. Jessica had spent years tearing me down, making me feel like I was nothing. Now, she was the one losing everything. Karma had a funny way of working things out. One afternoon, while I was sitting in my new apartment, enjoying a rare moment of absolute peace, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Jessica, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I miss you. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, I deleted the message. I didn't need closure. I didn't need an apology. I had already won. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.